He stood over the sheriff's grave, stunned by the will that named a quiet, grieving woman as his bride, and him as the one who must take her hand. What began as an unwanted duty slowly turned into something else entirely, and it just might save the outlaw no one thought could change. In Caldera Ridge, where justice comes hard and mercy is rarer than water in a drought, the sun beats down mercilessly on wooden storefronts, casting shadows that whisper of secrets and violence yet to come. Inside Doc Peterson's clinic, Marshal Everett Harlan lies dying on a blood-soaked table, his badge catching sunlight through a cracked window. 3 bullets from this morning's shootout have found their mark, and everyone knows there's no coming back from wounds like these. Chained to a corner chair sits Holt Remy, the notorious outlaw whose gang has terrorized 3 counties for 2 years. His left shoulder is wrapped in crude bandages, blood seeping through white cloth. His weathered face bears scars that tell stories no decent person wants to hear. "Bring me the papers," Marshal Harlan gasps, voice barely audible above labored breathing. Doc Peterson hesitates, exchanging worried glances with townspeople who've gathered to witness what everyone assumes will be a deathbed confession. What happens next defies every expectation. With trembling hands, Harlan produces a sealed envelope, an official document bearing the territorial seal and witness signatures. His dying eyes lock onto Holt's defiant stare as he speaks words that will change 2 lives forever. "By the power vested in me as territorial marshal, and by this legally binding last will and testament, I hereby declare that Holt Remy must marry Kalea Morrison, my ward, within 3 days of my death." The silence is deafening. Holt's chains rattle as he lunges forward, face twisted with rage. "You son of a..." His curse is cut short by a coughing fit that sends blood spattering across his shirt. "It's legal and binding," Harlan whispers, pressing the document into Doc Peterson's hands. Witnessed, sealed, recorded with territorial authorities, he obeys or hangs for his crimes. Standing in the doorway like a ghost made flesh is Kalea Morrison herself, 24 years old, with steel-gray eyes that have seen too much and a spine straighter than a rifle barrel. She doesn't flinch when Holt's murderous gaze turns to her. "Why?" Holt snarls, the single word carrying years of fury and confusion. Kalea's answer is simple, delivered in a voice as steady as winter ice. "Because dying men sometimes see clearer than the living." Marshal Harlan's final breath rattles out, just as the preacher arrives, black book in hand, ready to perform the most unusual wedding ceremony in Caldera Ridge's violent history. If this twist caught you off guard, you won't believe what happens next. To understand why Kalea Morrison agreed to such an arrangement, you have to know her story. And it begins 20 years ago, with a rope, a tree, and a father whose crimes finally caught up with him. Devil Drew Morrison was everything his nickname suggested. A cold-blooded killer who robbed banks, burned homesteads, and left widows and orphans across 3 territories. When the law finally cornered him outside Caldera Ridge, there was no trial, just a sturdy oak tree and a community tired of burying innocent people. 8-year-old Kalea watched from the jailhouse window as they strung her father up, his body dancing against the sky like a macabre marionette. She didn't cry, couldn't cry, because tears were a luxury she'd learned to live without during years of following an outlaw father, from hideout to hideout. Marshal Harlan found her there 3 hours later, still standing at that window, small hands pressed against glass, as if she could somehow change what she'd witnessed. Most lawmen would have shipped her to the nearest orphanage, but Everett Harlan saw something in those steel-gray eyes that reminded him of his own daughter, lost to cholera 5 years prior. "You can stay," he told her simply, "but you follow my ways now, not your father's." Growing up in a jailhouse teaches you things most children never learn. Kalea learned to read wanted posters before fairy tales, learned to bind bullet wounds before braiding hair. She watched Harlan dispense justice with a steady hand and fair heart, slowly understanding the difference between law and mere violence. The townspeople never quite trusted her. How could they, when Devil Drew's blood ran through her veins? They were polite enough, but always watched from corners of their eyes, waiting for some sign that the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. Kalea learned to live with their suspicion, their whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. But Marshal Harlan saw something different. He saw how she tended injured prisoners with gentle hands, how she read law books late into the night, how she never once asked about her father's stolen money or where it might be hidden. He saw a young woman who understood justice in ways most adults never would. "Justice isn't about revenge," Harlan told her one evening as they sat on the jailhouse porch, watching sunset over the town her father had terrorized. "It's about balance. Sometimes that means punishment, sometimes mercy, and sometimes giving someone a chance to choose a different path." Those words echoed in Kalea's mind 3 months ago, when Harlan showed her the will he'd drawn up. She could have refused, should have refused, according to every reasonable person in town. But Kalea had spent years studying wanted posters, reading crime reports, understanding patterns that led men to violence. And in all those reports about Holt Remy's crimes, she'd found something others had missed, something that made her believe this particular outlaw was worth saving. The courthouse has never hosted a ceremony quite like this one. Holt stands at what passes for an altar, wrists still bearing purple bruises from iron shackles, his wedding attire a borrowed shirt that doesn't quite hide shoulder bandages. Every few seconds, his eyes dart toward the door, calculating distances, counting exits, planning escape. Kalea approaches, wearing her mother's wedding dress, simple blue cotton, carefully mended over the years. The only thing she has left from a woman who died too young and loved too poorly. Her hair is pinned back severely, revealing the determined set of her jaw and steadiness in gray eyes that unnerves even the preacher. Reverend Samuel Matthews has officiated weddings for 23 years, but never one where the groom was technically under arrest and the bride looked like she was attending a funeral. His hands shake as he opens his worn Bible, pages yellowed with age and marked with fingerprints of countless ceremonies that made more sense than this one. "Dearly beloved," he begins, voice cracking, "we are gathered to witness the union of Holt Remy and Kalea Morrison, as decreed by Marshal Everett Harlan's last will and testament." The small crowd shifts uncomfortably. Doc Peterson sits in front, still stunned by morning events. Several townspeople line wooden benches, faces bearing expressions ranging from morbid curiosity to outright disapproval. Deputy Walsh stands near the back door, hand resting casually on his gun. When Reverend Matthews reaches the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, the silence stretches uncomfortably. Holt's jaw clenches and unclenches, muscle jumping beneath skin tanned by years of desert sun and marked by too many fights. "The rings," the preacher prompts, though everyone knows there are no rings. This ceremony was arranged too quickly for such niceties. Kalea surprises everyone by producing a simple gold band from her pocket, her mother's wedding ring, worn thin by years of hard living, but still bearing the faint inscription, "Forever Bound," inside. She holds it out to Holt, hands steady as stone. Holt stares at the ring like it's a coiled snake. "You just made me a prisoner again," he whispers, loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough that others can't make out the words. Kalea's response is equally quiet, but there's steel in her voice. "Not if you keep your promise." "What promise?" he snarls. "The one you're about to make." The ring slides onto his finger with surprising ease, as if meant to be there. Holt flexes his hand, feeling unfamiliar weight of gold, the first jewelry he's worn since his mother's locket, lost in a Dodge City card game 3 years back. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico," Reverend Matthews continues, voice gaining strength as the ceremony nears its end. I now pronounce you husband and wife." The traditional kiss is replaced by a long, measuring look between bride and groom. Two people bound by a dead man's wishes and their own complicated reasons for accepting such an arrangement. "So," Holt says finally, voice rough with exhaustion and pain, "what happens now, Mrs. Remy?" Kalea's smile is small, but genuine. "Now we go home and figure out how to live with what we've done." The cabin that Marshal Harlan left to Kalea sits on Caldera Ridge's outskirts, far enough from town for privacy, but close enough that chimney smoke can be seen from Main Street. It's modest 2 rooms, stone fireplace, and a covered porch facing west toward mountains, but built solid, like everything Harlan ever touched. Holt follows Kalea through the front door like a man walking to execution, eyes cataloging every detail with practiced assessment of someone who spent years planning escapes. Windows 2 in the main room, 1 in the bedroom. Back door leading to kitchen garden. Root cellar with outside access. Within minutes, he's mapped 3 different routes out. "Don't," Kalea says without turning around, as if she can read his thoughts. "Don't what?" "Don't even think about running." She sets her mother's Bible on the rough-hewn table and turns to face him, hand resting casually on the gun belt she wears like part of her skin. "You try that, and I'll finish what the bullet didn't." Holt's laugh is bitter. "So I traded one cell for another. At least in jail, they fed me regular. There's bread in the kitchen and jerky in the pantry." Kalea replies, unfazed by his hostility. "Help yourself. Just remember this cabin has one rule: you don't leave without me knowing where you're going." The first night passes in tense silence. Kalea takes the bedroom. Holt makes himself a bed on the floor near the fireplace, close enough to the front door to hear anyone approaching, but far enough from Kalea that she won't feel threatened. He lies awake most of the night, listening to house-settling sounds, distant coyote howls, and soft breathing of a woman who's either very brave or very foolish. Morning brings small gestures neither acknowledges directly. Kalea leaves clean water and fresh bandages beside Holt's makeshift bed. Holt notices the roof over the kitchen has a loose board letting in rain, and spends an hour fixing it while she tends the vegetable garden behind the house. Neither mentions these acts of consideration, but both notice them. It's on the 3rd day that Holt first sees past Kalea's carefully maintained facade. He's walking the property perimeter, not planning escape, he tells himself. Just getting familiar with the lay of the land when he hears her voice, soft and gentle in a way he's never heard before. Behind the cabin, near a small corral Harlan built for horses, Kalea is working with a wild Mustang colt that can't be more than 6 months old. The animal is clearly injured. There's a gash on its left flank that's been carefully cleaned and bandaged and skittish as hell, but Kalea approaches it with infinite patience. "Easy, boy," she murmurs, holding out her hand for the colt to sniff. "Nobody's going to hurt you here. You just need time to heal, same as the rest of us." Holt watches from shadows as she slowly gains the animal's trust, offering grain from her palm and speaking in gentle tones most people reserve for their own children. There's something almost sacred about the scene, this woman, who wears a gun-like armor, showing such tenderness to a creature hurt by the world. When she finally notices him watching, Kalea's expression immediately hardens. "His name's Thunder," she says simply. "Found him caught in barbed wire 3 days ago. Figured he deserved a chance." That night, for the first time since the wedding, they sit together on the porch as the sun sets behind mountains. They don't talk. Both are too guarded for easy conversation. But the silence feels less hostile than before. "Why me?" he asks finally, the question eating at him since Marshal Harlan spoke those binding words. Kalea is quiet. So long, Holt thinks she won't answer. Then, just as the last light fades, she speaks. Because sometimes the most broken things are the strongest once they're mended right. The nightmares come on the 5th night, pulling Holt from restless sleep with memories he's spent years trying to bury. He wakes gasping, sweat cooling despite desert chill, and makes a decision that's probably stupid but feels necessary. He needs to visit his past, to see if the ghosts are still waiting where he left them. The old hideout sits in a box canyon 12 miles north of Caldera Ridge, hidden behind cottonwoods and accessible only through a narrow pass most people would miss. Holt and his gang used this place for 3 years, long enough to wear smooth paths between cave and creek, to build lean-tos and fire pits, to turn temporary shelter into something that almost felt like home. He leaves just before dawn, slipping out while Kalea sleeps, borrowing Harlan's old horse from the barn. The ride gives him time to think, to sort through the tangle of emotions that marriage has stirred up. Part of him expected to feel trapped, desperate to escape bonds that tie him to Caldera Ridge and the woman who wears his name. Instead, he finds himself thinking about the way Kalea's hand felt when she placed that ring on his finger, about the trust it took for her to sleep in the same house as a known killer. The canyon looks smaller than he remembered, hiding places less secure, the whole setup more pathetic than the fortress his memory had constructed. 3 years of weather have taken their toll, lean-tos half collapsed, fire pits filled with debris, and what had once seemed like a perfect stronghold now looks like exactly what it was. A place where desperate men came to lick wounds and plan their next mistake. Holt's inspection is interrupted by approaching horses, multiple riders, moving fast, iron shoes, striking stone in a rhythm that makes his blood run cold. He recognizes that particular cadence because he helped create it, drilling his gang until they could ride in formation by sound alone. They round the bend in dust and violence. Jake Wheeler, Tom Bradley, and Dutch Kerner, the 3 surviving members of Holt's old gang. They're older now, harder, with scars that come from years of living by the gun. But their eyes hold the same wild desperation Holt remembers, the look of men who've burned too many bridges to ever find their way home. Well, Jake drawls, hand resting on his Colt's butt. Look what the cat dragged in. Heard you got yourself hitched, Holt. Didn't believe it till I saw you riding that lawman's horse. Dutch spits tobacco juice that barely misses Holt's boots. Told you he'd gone soft, Jake. Living in town, playing house with some woman. Next thing you know, he'll be wearing a badge and hunting his old friends. The accusation stings because there's truth in it, or at least the possibility of truth. A week ago, Holt would have laughed at caring about law and order, about protecting innocent people, about building something instead of just taking it. Now, after days of watching Kalea tend wounded animals and fix what's broken, he's not sure who he is anymore. I ain't hunting nobody, Holt says carefully, voice carrying the calm that comes from knowing violence is seconds away. Just came to see the old place one more time. Bullshit, Tom snarls, face twisted with rage of someone who spent too many nights sleeping on hard ground while his former leader slept in a real bed. You sold us out, didn't you? Made some deal with that marshal before he died. The horses shift nervously, sensing tension. Holt keeps his hands visible but ready, knowing any sudden movement could trigger a gunfight that will leave at least one of them dead. No deals, Holt says firmly. What happened after? That's between me and my conscience. Jake's smile is ugly and knowing. Conscience? That's a new one for you, Holt. He glances at his companions, building momentum for whatever violence he's planning. Maybe that wife of yours is a bad influence. Maybe we ought to pay her a visit. The threat against Kalea changes everything. Holt's hand moves to his gun, with fluid motion of someone who's drawn on men hundreds of times. These aren't strangers threatening some random woman they're talking about, hurting his wife. You stay away from her, Holt says, voice dropping to deadly quiet that old enemies recognize as final warning. You want to settle something with me? We settle it here and now. Finally, Jake breaks the tension with humorless laughter. Easy there, husband. We're just talking. But you remember this, Holt, you keep playing house, and you'll end up in a grave next to that marshal. They ride away in the same dust cloud they arrived in, leaving Holt alone with ruins of his past and growing certainty that his new life has just become infinitely more dangerous. What he doesn't know is that Kalia followed him, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to hear every word. Holt returns to the cabin expecting anger, accusations, maybe even Kalea's rifle pointed at his chest. Instead, he finds her sitting at the kitchen table with coffee growing cold and a manila folder spread open like a challenge waiting to be accepted. "Sit down," she says without looking up, voice carrying quiet authority that makes arguing seem pointless. "We need to talk." The folder contains everything wanted posters, bearing Holt's likeness, and crimes that would take an hour to read aloud. Newspaper clippings detailing bank robberies and train holdups, even grainy photographs taken by witnesses brave enough to document the aftermath of his gang's work. But it's not the evidence of his crimes that stops Holt cold. It's the other papers mixed in witness statements, survivor testimonies, and one particular newspaper article that makes his blood run cold because he'd hoped no one would ever connect that story to his name. "Amarillo," Kalia says simply, tapping the headline. "The 15th of March, 1885. Your gang hit the First National Bank, took nearly $3,000. But something went wrong, didn't it?" Holt stares at the article, remembering that day with perfect clarity despite trying to forget it for 2 years. They'd planned the job for weeks, timing it for lunch hour, when the bank would be nearly empty. What they hadn't counted on was the school group that chose that exact moment to tour the building 18 children between ages 6 and 12. "The fire started in the back room," Kalia continues, reading from witness statements. "The children were trapped upstairs when the staircase caught fire. Everyone assumed they'd die, except someone kept going back into that burning building, pulling kids out one by one. The newspaper had gotten most details wrong, as newspapers usually do. They'd painted the rescue as a group effort by brave townspeople, never mentioning that the man risking his life to save those children was the same outlaw who'd robbed their bank 5 minutes earlier. 7 trips, Kalea says, eyes finally meeting his across the table. 7 times you went back into that fire. The last time, the roof was already starting to cave in, but you went anyway because there was still 1 child unaccounted for." Holt's hands clench into fists on the table surface. "How do you know all this?" "Because I wrote to every survivor I could find." Kalea replies matter-of-factly. "Spent the last 3 months tracking down witnesses, reading every report, trying to understand who you really are under all the wanted posters." She pulls out another paper, a letter written in a child's careful handwriting. This is from Amy Preston. She's 9 now, living with her grandparents in Kansas City. She still draws pictures of the man who saved her. Always the same description: tall, dark hair, kind eyes, and a scar on his left hand from where burning timber caught him. Holt unconsciously touches the scar she mentioned, a white line across his knuckles that he'd told people came from a knife fight. In reality, it came from grabbing a 7-year-old girl's hand and pulling her through a window while the room collapsed behind them. "Why?" he asks, voice rough with emotions he doesn't know how to name. Kalea closes the folder carefully. "Because I know what it's like to be judged by your worst day instead of your best one." She stands and moves to the window, looking out at the corral, where thunder is slowly learning to trust human touch again. "Marshall Harlan told me the week before he died that the hardest part of wearing a badge wasn't catching the bad men. It was learning to recognize the good ones who just lost their way." "And you think I'm one of those?" Holt asks. Kalea turns back to him, her carefully maintained guard dropping completely. "I think you went into a burning building 7 times to save children who weren't yours. And I think maybe you're exactly the kind of man this territory needs, if you're willing to stop running from who you could be." The attack comes 3 nights later, just as Kalea is finishing evening chores, and Holt is working by lamplight to repair a broken harness. The first sign of trouble is thunder. The Mustang colt starts pacing in his corral, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring, as he scents something that doesn't belong. Holt sets down his work immediately, recognizing the signs of an animal detecting danger. Years of living on the wrong side of the law have taught him to trust horse instincts better than most people's judgment. "Company coming," he says quietly, moving to the window. Thunder's spooked. Kalea doesn't question his assessment. She simply blows out lamps and moves to the gun cabinet, selecting a Winchester rifle. Her movements are efficient and practiced, those of someone who's lived with the possibility of violence most of her life. The riders approach without attempting stealth, their horses' hooves drumming against hard-packed earth like a death knell. Holt counts at least 4 distinct sets of hoofbeats and recognizes the particular rhythm his old gang uses when moving in formation for an attack. "It's them," he says, and Kalea nods grimly, already moving to extinguish the fire. The cabin plunges into darkness, leaving them with nothing but moonlight and the growing sound of approaching danger. Jake Wheeler's voice cuts through the night like a blade, filled with jovial menace that promises violence. "Holt, come on out, old friend. We just want to talk to you and that pretty wife of yours." From his position near the front window, Holt can see them spread out in a rough semicircle around the cabin. 5 men, all armed, positioned to cover exits and prevent escape. They're not here for conversation. This is an execution party. "What do they want?" Kalea whispers, crouching beside him with her rifle ready. "To kill me," Holt replies matter-of-factly. "And probably you too, now that you know about their operations. Dead wives don't testify at trials." Dutch's voice joins the chorus outside, slightly slurred from drinking but still dangerous. "We know you're in there, Holt. You got 30 seconds to come out peaceful-like, or we start putting holes in that cabin." Kalea meets Holt's eyes in the darkness, and something passes between them, an understanding that transcends words. They're going to fight, both of them, side by side, against odds that would make sensible people surrender. "Jake," Holt calls out to the men who were once his brothers in crime, "you want me, you got me. But there's no need to involve Kalea in our business." The laughter that greets this offer is ugly and knowing. "Oh, Holt," Jake calls back, voice thick with false sympathy. "Your pretty wife there, she's been asking questions. Writing letters, talking to people who survived our business ventures, that makes her a loose end." The first shot comes without warning, shattering the front window and sending glass spraying across the cabin floor. Kalea returns fire immediately, her Winchester barking as she puts a bullet through the shoulder of the man who fired first. What follows is chaos, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like deadly stars, thunder of gunfire echoing off canyon walls, horses screaming and men cursing as the carefully planned ambush turns into a running gun battle. Holt fights with the desperate efficiency of a man protecting something more valuable than his own life. But he's outnumbered, and walls that provide cover also limit his mobility. It's Kalea who changes the tide. Moving like a ghost through darkness, she slips out the back door during a lull in firing and makes her way to high ground behind the barn. From there, she has a clear view of the attackers' positions and skill to make every shot count. Her first bullet drops Dutch. Her second catches Tom Bradley in the leg. But it's her third shot that ends the fight-perfect marksmanship that takes Jake Wheeler square in the chest. The gang's leader pitches backward from his saddle as his body hits the ground with finality only death can provide. The surviving gang members break and run, leaving their wounded behind as they disappear into the night. Dawn breaks over Caldera Ridge like a wound in the sky, all red and gold and promising nothing but trouble. Word of the night's gun battle has already reached town. Smoke and gunfire carry far in desert air. When Deputy Walsh rode out to investigate, he found 3 bodies and enough blood to paint a barn. Now the surviving members of Holt's old gang are holed up in the Broken Wheel Saloon, holding the bartender and 2 customers hostage while they plan their final play. Tom Bradley, wounded but still dangerous, has barricaded the front entrance. Despite his shoulder wound, Dutch has positioned himself at the back door with a shotgun. "They want me," Holt tells Sheriff Morrison as they study the saloon from across the street. "This is between me and them." Sheriff Morrison shakes his head grimly. "Can't let you do that, Remy. Those boys in there have killed 2 people already. This ain't about your past anymore. This is about justice." But Kalea has other ideas. While the men debate strategy, she's been studying the situation with cold calculation. The broken wheel has a weakness the gang members don't know about, a root cellar connecting to the building's foundation, accessible through a hidden entrance behind Thompson's barbershop. "There's another way in," she tells Holt, spreading a hand-drawn map on the sheriff's wagon hood. "Harlan showed me the tunnel system under Main Street when I was 16. Most buildings connect underground." Holt studies the map, recognizing the tactical advantage immediately. "You want to come up through the floor while they're watching the doors." "We want to come up through the floor," Kalea corrects him, checking her weapons. "You don't go in there alone. We're married now, remember?" The tunnels beneath Caldera Ridge are cramped and dark. Kalea leads the way, moving with confidence, while Holt follows close behind. Above them, they can hear voices, Tom Bradley shouting orders, Dutch cursing about his wounded shoulder, the terrified whimpering of hostages. "Here," Kalea whispers, stopping beneath the saloon's main floor. "When I give the signal, we go up fast and hard." The signal comes in the form of Sheriff Morrison's voice from the street outside. "Bradley, come out peaceful, and nobody else has to die." The gang's response is predictable, a volley of shots through the front windows. In the chaos, Kalea pushes open the hidden panel behind the bar, and they emerge like vengeful spirit. The fight is close quarters and brutal. Tom Bradley spins toward them, but Holt's first shot takes him in the chest. Dutch tries to bring his shotgun to bear, but Kalea's rifle cracks like thunder, and the outlaw crashes backward through the saloon's back door. As the smoke clears, Holt realizes that one of the hostages, Sarah Miller, has been caught in the crossfire. She's alive, but bleeding from a leg wound. "I'm sorry," Holt tells her, as Kalea applies pressure to stop the bleeding. "This is all my fault." Sarah's response surprises everyone. Instead of blame, she reaches out and grabs Holt's hand. "No," she says firmly, "this is their fault. You saved us." As Doc Peterson tends to Sarah's wound, Kalea and Holt stand together in the doorway, watching the sun climb higher over a town that's finally safe. "Is it over?" Kalea asks softly. Holt considers the question seriously. "Yeah," he says finally, "I think it really is." 3 weeks after the showdown at the Broken Wheel Saloon, Caldera Ridge has settled into a new rhythm, one that includes Holt Remy as something more than just the dangerous outlaw who married the marshal's ward. People nod when they pass him on the street now, tip their hats with genuine respect. Mrs. Henderson even invited both him and Kalea to her daughter's wedding. The change isn't lost on Holt. After years of being regarded with suspicion and fear, the simple act of being acknowledged as a person rather than a threat feels revolutionary. For the first time in his adult life, Holt is experiencing what it means to be part of a community instead of running from one. The cabin has evolved too, taking on characteristics of a real home. Kalea's books share shelf space with Holt's few possessions. Their clothes hang together on the line. The kitchen table bears the comfortable clutter of 2 people who've learned to live together, coffee cups from breakfast, letters from Clara, and papers that accumulate when building a legitimate life. The most significant change is in Thunder, the Mustang colt Kalea rescued from barbed wire. Under their combined care, the animal has grown strong and trusting. Watching Thunder's transformation has become a daily reminder of what patience and kindness can accomplish. "Judge Whitaker's dropping the bounty on you," Kalea announces one evening as they sit on the porch, watching Thunder graze. She holds up an official document, citing extenuating acts of valor in defense of innocent civilians. "You're officially a free man Holt Remy. The words should bring relief, but instead, Holt feels oddly empty, as if freedom has lost some of its meaning now that he's actually achieved it. Free, he repeats, testing the word. Don't rightly know what that means anymore. Kalea studies his face in the dying light. Means you can leave if you want to. Nobody's forcing you to stay married to a woman you barely know. The suggestion hits Holt like a physical blow. The marriage was arranged a legal obligation created by a dying man's bizarre last wishes. Now that the danger has passed, there's nothing preventing him from riding toward whatever horizon calls to him. Except that the idea of leaving feels like the worst kind of betrayal, not just of her, but of himself. And if I don't want to leave? He asks carefully. Then you stay, Kalea replies simply, but there's something in her voice that suggests the answer matters more than she's willing to admit. Question is, do you stay because you have to, or because you want to? The marriage began as an obligation, a choice between wedding rings and a hangman's noose. But somewhere in the process of learning to live together, of fighting side by side, obligation has transformed into something deeper. I used to think freedom meant being able to ride away from any situation that got uncomfortable, Holt says slowly. No ties, no responsibilities. But sitting here with you, watching that colt learn to trust again, seeing how the townspeople treat us like we belong, I'm starting to think maybe real freedom is having something worth staying for. Kalea's smile is small, but genuine. So what are you saying, husband? I'm saying I still feel like a prisoner, Holt admits, echoing the words he spoke during their wedding ceremony. But maybe we can build something that neither of us wants to escape from. The silence that follows is comfortable, filled with evening sounds of a world at peace, crickets beginning their nightly chorus, thunder's gentle nickering as he settles down. There's something I need to tell you, Kalea says finally, about why I really agreed to Marshal Harlan's will. She turns to face him fully, her gray eyes reflecting the first stars. I was in love with the idea of you before we ever met. With the man who went into that burning building 7 times to save children he'd never seen before. The kiss that follows is their first real one, born of choice rather than obligation. It tastes like coffee and promises, like second chances and new beginnings. When they break apart, Holt rests his forehead against hers, marveling at how right this feels. Mrs. Remy, he says softly. Mr. Remy, she replies, and her smile could light up the entire territory. As the stars wheel overhead, Holt finally understands what Marshal Harlan saw in his dying moments. Sometimes, the most unexpected unions create the strongest bonds. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.